Before I dive into this story, please support the channel, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next parts of this unbelievable story. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this unfolds. I never thought I'd be that guy writing about betrayal on the internet. My wife and I had been married for 22 years. We built a life together, raised 2 kids who are now grown, paid off a house, and survived the kind of financial struggles that would have broken many couples. To the outside world, we looked solid. People would often tell me how lucky I was to have such a devoted, caring wife. But behind closed doors, things had started to change. At first, it was subtle. She became distracted. Meals that she used to cook with love were suddenly rushed or forgotten. She used to talk my ear off about every little thing that happened in her day, but lately, silence had become the new norm. When I asked if something was wrong, she would snap back with a sharp, "Why are you always nagging me? Can't a woman be tired sometimes?" It stung, but I brushed it off. We're not young anymore, stress, work, and age all take their toll, right? Then came the phone. She had always been casual about leaving it lying around. But now, that thing was glued to her hand. Notifications would come in, and she'd tilt the screen away from me. I'd ask who it was, and she'd give vague answers, "Just work," or "It's nothing you'd care about." If I pressed further, she'd roll her eyes like I was some jealous teenager. The late-night walks were the next red flag. She'd never been one for exercise, but suddenly she was clearing her head almost every night. When I offered to go with her, she'd bark, "God, can't I have a minute to myself?" It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. Cold. Sharp. Almost like she hated me for simply existing in the same room. And yet, every time I let suspicion slip into my voice, she would double down. "You're paranoid," she'd say. "You've been watching too many of those stupid crime shows. Maybe you're the one hiding something." That's what hurt the most, her ability to turn it around, to make me feel crazy for even noticing. Still, in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, after 22 years, could she really be capable of betraying me like that? I didn't have proof yet. Just whispers of doubt in the quiet of the night. But I would soon learn that the truth was far uglier than I could have imagined. That night is burned into my memory like a scar. It was a Thursday, nothing special about it at first. I came home from work, expecting the usual quiet dinner and maybe some TV before bed. But the house was strangely silent. My wife wasn't in the kitchen, and the smell of dinner wasn't in the air. Instead, I found a note on the counter, "Went for a walk, don't wait up." That alone wasn't unusual anymore, but something about the handwriting caught my eye. It was rushed, almost sloppy. My wife's handwriting had always been neat, controlled. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the note like it was some kind of code I couldn't crack. I tried to distract myself, fixed a sandwich, turned on the TV. But every minute that passed gnawed at me. Where exactly was she walking for hours at a time? By 10 p.m. my patience snapped. I grabbed my keys and decided to drive around the neighborhood, telling myself I was just being protective. She usually walked the same 2 or 3 blocks. But she wasn't there. I circled again. Nothing. That's when I noticed her car. Parked outside a small cafe on the edge of town. The lights were off inside, the place had been closed for hours. And yet, there was her car, sitting in the dark like a beacon. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled over half a block away, killed the engine, and just watched. At first, nothing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the cafe's side door creaked open. 2 figures stepped out. One was my wife. The other, a man I didn't recognize. He was younger, taller, and his hand was on her back in a way that made my stomach twist. They laughed at something, and then, they kissed. Not a friendly peck, not a quick goodbye. A long, slow, deliberate kiss that told me everything I had been denying. I froze. I wanted to storm out, to scream, to demand answers. But I couldn't move. My body betrayed me. All I could do was watch as she slipped into his car like it was the most natural thing in the world. My wife, the woman I had trusted for more than 2 decades, was living a double life. I sat there in my own car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A part of me wanted to follow them, to know where she was really going. Another part of me wanted to drive home and pretend I had never seen it. But deep down, I knew, this was just the beginning of a storm I wasn't ready for. That night is burned into my memory like a scar. It was a Thursday, nothing special about it at first. I came home from work, expecting the usual quiet dinner and maybe some TV before bed. But the house was strangely silent. My wife wasn't in the kitchen, and the smell of dinner wasn't in the air. Instead, I found a note on the counter, "Went for a walk, don't wait up." That alone wasn't unusual anymore, but something about the handwriting caught my eye. It was rushed, almost sloppy. My wife's handwriting had always been neat, controlled. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the note like it was some kind of code I couldn't crack. I tried to distract myself, fixed a sandwich, turned on the TV. But every minute that passed gnawed at me. Where exactly was she walking for hours at a time? By 10 p.m. my patience snapped. I grabbed my keys and decided to drive around the neighborhood, telling myself I was just being protective. She usually walked the same 2 or 3 blocks. But she wasn't there. I circled again. Nothing. That's when I noticed her car. Parked outside a small cafe on the edge of town. The lights were off inside, the place had been closed for hours. And yet, there was her car, sitting in the dark like a beacon. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled over half a block away, killed the engine, and just watched. At first, nothing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the cafe's side door creaked open. 2 figures stepped out. One was my wife. The other, a man I didn't recognize. He was younger, taller, and his hand was on her back in a way that made my stomach twist. They laughed at something, and then, they kissed. Not a friendly peck, not a quick goodbye. A long, slow, deliberate kiss that told me everything I had been denying. I froze. I wanted to storm out, to scream, to demand answers. But I couldn't move. My body betrayed me. All I could do was watch as she slipped into his car like it was the most natural thing in the world. My wife, the woman I had trusted for more than 2 decades, was living a double life. I sat there in my own car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A part of me wanted to follow them, to know where she was really going. Another part of me wanted to drive home and pretend I had never seen it. But deep down, I knew, this was just the beginning of a storm I wasn't ready for. That night is burned into my memory like a scar. It was a Thursday, nothing special about it at first. I came home from work, expecting the usual quiet dinner and maybe some TV before bed. But the house was strangely silent. My wife wasn't in the kitchen, and the smell of dinner wasn't in the air. Instead, I found a note on the counter, "Went for a walk, don't wait up." That alone wasn't unusual anymore, but something about the handwriting caught my eye. It was rushed, almost sloppy. My wife's handwriting had always been neat, controlled. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the note like it was some kind of code I couldn't crack. I tried to distract myself, fixed a sandwich, turned on the TV. But every minute that passed gnawed at me. Where exactly was she walking for hours at a time? By 10 p.m. my patience snapped. I grabbed my keys and decided to drive around the neighborhood, telling myself I was just being protective. She usually walked the same 2 or 3 blocks. But she wasn't there. I circled again. Nothing. That's when I noticed her car. Parked outside a small cafe on the edge of town. The lights were off inside, the place had been closed for hours. And yet, there was her car, sitting in the dark like a beacon. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled over half a block away, killed the engine, and just watched. At first, nothing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the cafe's side door creaked open. Two figures stepped out. One was my wife. The other, a man I didn't recognize. He was younger, taller, and his hand was on her back in a way that made my stomach twist. They laughed at something, and then, they kissed. Not a friendly peck, not a quick goodbye. A long, slow, deliberate kiss that told me everything I had been denying. I froze. I wanted to storm out, to scream, to demand answers. But I couldn't move. My body betrayed me. All I could do was watch as she slipped into his car like it was the most natural thing in the world. My wife, the woman I had trusted for more than 2 decades, was living a double life. I sat there in my own car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A part of me wanted to follow them, to know where she was really going. Another part of me wanted to drive home and pretend I had never seen it. But deep down, I knew, this was just the beginning of a storm I wasn't ready for. When she saw me holding her phone, her face transformed in an instant. No trace of the sweet, humming wife from the morning before, just pure, icy rage. Give that to me, she said, every word sharp as glass. I didn't move. My hands were trembling, but I held the phone tight. How long, Sarah? How long has this been going on? She crossed her arms, smirked, and tilted her head. Oh, so now you're the detective. What, did you snoop through my phone like a pathetic old man with nothing better to do? Her words stung, but I pressed on. Don't play games. I saw the photos. The messages. Him. For the first time, a flicker of panic crossed her face. But it lasted only a second before she twisted it into a sneer. And what are you going to do about it? Leave me. You don't have the guts. You need me. My blood boiled. Need you? You've been lying to me, humiliating me. She cut me off with a laugh. Humiliating you? Oh, please. You were so blind, you didn't even notice half the things going on around you. You still don't. That line hit me differently. The way she said it, like there was more to the story. Something I hadn't uncovered yet. I slammed the phone on the counter. What does that mean? She leaned closer, her eyes glinting with something between hatred and amusement. It means you've only scratched the surface. You think this is about a fling? No, darling. This is bigger than you realize. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? But she just snatched the phone off the counter, shoved it into her pocket, and stormed out of the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the front door slam. I sat there in silence, my pulse racing, the echo of her words rattling in my skull. This is bigger than you realize. I thought catching her cheating was the end of the story. I was wrong. It was only the beginning. That night I couldn't sit still. My wife had stormed out, phone in her pocket, leaving me with nothing but questions. Her words echoed in my mind, this is bigger than you realize. Bigger than cheating? What could be bigger than throwing away a 22-year marriage for some stranger? I paced the house until my eyes landed on her purse, sitting by the coat rack. Normally I wouldn't invade her privacy any further, but after what I'd seen, privacy was the least of my concerns. Inside, I found something that made my blood run cold, a bank statement. I knew most of our accounts, we'd always managed bills together, but this one was different. It was in her name only. And the numbers didn't add up. Large withdrawals, thousands of dollars, made in cash, always on the same days she claimed to be walking. And then the deposits. Odd, random amounts coming in from an account I didn't recognize. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the papers. At the bottom of one page, in the memo line of a deposit, was a name. The same name I had seen in her messages. His name. My heart sank. This wasn't just an affair, it was financial. She wasn't just lying to me about her love life. She was moving money, hiding something. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. 22 years of building trust, working overtime shifts, saving every penny for our future, and she was bleeding us dry behind my back. I took photos of every document with my phone. My gut told me I'd need evidence, not just for myself, but for what was coming. When she finally came home, hours later, I didn't confront her. I pretended to be asleep. But inside, I was boiling. She thought she was untouchable. She thought I was blind. But I had proof now, and if she was hiding money, then maybe, just maybe, she was hiding something even darker. I had no idea that the next step I took would drag me into a web of lies I couldn't untangle alone. By the next morning, my nerves were shot. I hadn't slept a wink. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bank statements, those withdrawals, that name. I knew I couldn't keep this bottled up any longer. But who could I even talk to? Friends? Neighbors? No, people love gossip, and I wasn't about to turn my pain into their entertainment. Then, as if fate had decided for me, my son, Daniel, stopped by. He's 26, lives on his own, but comes over once or twice a week to check in. He took one look at me and frowned. "Dad, what's going on? You look like hell." For a moment, I wanted to lie, protect him. Pretend everything was fine. But when I opened my mouth, the truth spilled out. Not all of it, not the photos of his mother with another man, but enough. The late-night walks. The lies. The money I found. His face went pale. He sat down heavily at the table. "You're telling me Mom's stealing from us?" "From me, from this family," I corrected, bitterness in my voice. "And I don't know why. Or for who." Daniel leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Show me." So I did. The photos of the bank statements. The name linked to the deposits. The late-night withdrawals. He studied them like a detective, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Dad, this isn't just an affair. Look at these amounts. They're too regular. Too precise. This looks like payoffs. Or laundering." The word hit me like a punch. Laundering. My wife? The woman who used to clip coupons and cry when we couldn't afford vacations? "No," I muttered. "She wouldn't." But the evidence sat right there, staring back at us. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder. "We need to find out what she's doing. And we need to be smart about it. If she's mixed up with the wrong people, just confronting her could be dangerous." Dangerous. I hadn't even let my mind go there. But he was right. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It felt like stepping into something bigger, darker. And then, right as we were talking, her phone buzzed on the counter. She had left it behind in her rush. The message preview lit up the screen, "Meet tonight. Same place. Don't bring anything, he's getting suspicious." Daniel and I exchanged a look. For the first time in 22 years, I felt like I didn't even know who I was married to. That evening, Daniel and I sat in a car, parked half a block from our own house, waiting. I never thought I'd be in this position, spying on my own wife like some private investigator from a crime drama. But after everything I'd seen, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Sure enough, just after 9 p.m. the front door opened. She stepped out, dressed nicer than usual for a walk, hair done, a hint of perfume that drifted even to where we sat. She got into her car and drove off. Daniel started the engine, keeping the headlights off until we were a safe distance behind. My heart pounded so hard I thought she might hear it echoing down the street. She drove across town, not to the little cafe this time, but to the edge of an industrial park. A place I'd never seen her go before. Her car pulled into a nearly empty parking lot behind a warehouse. She got out, glanced around, then slipped through a side door like she'd done it 100 times. Daniel and I exchanged a look. "Dad," he whispered, "this isn't an affair. This is something else." We waited. 10 minutes. 15. Then the door opened again. A man stepped out, the same one I'd seen kissing her. Only this time, he wasn't affectionate. He was carrying a briefcase, looking around nervously, talking on a phone. Then another man appeared. Bigger. Rougher. Tattoos up his neck. Not the kind of guy you meet for coffee. My stomach twisted. What the hell was my wife involved in? Finally, she came out. And here's the part that made my blood freeze: she wasn't scared. She wasn't being forced. She was laughing. Joking. Comfortable, like she belonged there. The taller man handed her the briefcase. She popped it open just enough for the streetlight to catch stacks of cash inside. Cash. My wife. With strangers. In the middle of the night. I gripped Daniel's arm. "We need to go. Now." But before we could move, one of the men turned his head and squinted toward our car. For a split second, I thought we'd been caught. Daniel threw the car into gear and pulled away, heart racing as fast as mine. Neither of us spoke until we were several blocks away. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Dad. Mom's not just cheating. She's in business with them. Illegal business. And the worst part? I couldn't deny it anymore." The next morning, Daniel showed up at my house with his laptop under his arm and a look on his face I'll never forget, half fear, half determination. "I couldn't sleep," he said, dropping the laptop on the kitchen table. "I had to know who those men were." He pulled up a few grainy photos he'd managed to snap on his phone the night before. One of the tattooed guy, one of the man with the briefcase. "I ran them through a forum I use," Daniel explained. "And Dad, you're not going to like this." He clicked, and suddenly the screen was filled with articles. News reports. Police bulletins. The tattooed guy wasn't just some random thug. His name was all over local crime watch lists. Connected to an organized group involved in smuggling, extortion, and, God help me, even drug trafficking. My hands went cold. "And the other one?" I asked, barely able to speak. Daniel swallowed hard and clicked another file. The man with the briefcase had been under investigation years ago for financial fraud, though the charges had never stuck. He was rumored to be the money man for the same organization. I sat there, staring at the screen, while my entire reality crumbled around me. My wife, was involved with these men. Meeting them in the dead of night. Handling their money. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was dangerous. Daniel looked me in the eye. "Dad, this isn't just about your marriage. Mom could drag you down with her. If the police find out about her involvement and think you knew, you could be implicated." The words hit me like a freight train. Implicated. As if losing my marriage wasn't enough, now I could lose everything else: my freedom, my name, the respect I'd worked decades to build. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Daniel refreshed the forum page. A new post had appeared. It was blurry surveillance footage from the very same warehouse we'd seen last night. And there she was. My wife. Smiling. Handing over a folder to the tattooed man. The caption read, "Local authorities seeking more information on unidentified woman involved with known crime figures." Unidentified, for now. But how long until someone recognized her? Until our entire world came crashing down. That evening, I couldn't wait any longer. I knew I had to confront her. Daniel was tense, pacing behind me as we prepared for what felt like storming the gates of a fortress. But I had proof now: photos, bank statements, messages, even surveillance footage. I wasn't going in blind. "Sarah," I said, my voice low but firm when she walked in from work, "we need to talk. Now." She raised an eyebrow, the faintest smirk playing at her lips. Oh. About what, exactly? She asked, tilting her head as if she were discussing what flavor of ice cream to buy. I slammed a folder of evidence on the table, photos, messages, bank transactions, screenshots from the forum Daniel found. About all of this. About the men, the money, the lies. You've dragged us into something criminal. I need the truth. Her eyes widened, not in fear, but in mock surprise. Oh my God. This is serious, isn't it? She sounded almost excited, like I'd handed her a puzzle instead of a damning dossier. Excited? I shouted, anger bubbling. Do you have any idea what this means for me? For us? She leaned back, smirk never leaving her face. Relax, darling. I did what I had to do. You'd never understand. I felt my chest tighten. Understand? I raised you kids, paid for your life, and this is how you repay me. By stealing, lying, risking everything. Her tone shifted slightly. For the first time, a hint of vulnerability, or maybe strategy, crept in. Yes, I lied. Yes, I'm involved. But it's not what you think. I'm protecting us. I had no choice. I froze. Protecting us? By dealing with criminals? By hiding money? Are you insane? She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. You've always played it safe, lived by the rules, and guess what? Sometimes, rules get you nowhere. I did what was necessary. And if you think you can ruin me with this evidence, think again. I can spin this any way I want. You'll look like the desperate husband who didn't see anything coming. My hands shook. 22 years of trust, the life we built, it felt like it was burning around me. Yet, through all of her manipulations, one thing was clear, she was in deep, and she knew how to use it. And just as I thought I'd cornered her, her phone buzzed on the counter. A message previewed on the screen, he's asking questions. Make sure he doesn't find out everything. My stomach dropped. Not only was she lying and manipulating, but there was more, so much more I hadn't yet uncovered. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, smiling, laughing with those men, handling stacks of cash. But worse, the thought that she could manipulate this situation so skillfully chilled me to the bone. The next morning, I decided to dig a little deeper. Daniel sat beside me, laptop open, already combing through names and transactions. And then we stumbled across something that froze me. One of the accounts Sarah had been transferring money to, it wasn't some faceless business. It was registered under a name I recognized from years ago, a friend from our youth, someone I had trusted implicitly. My heart pounded. This wasn't random anymore. She wasn't just dealing with criminals, she had involved someone close to us. Someone who could tie our past, our friends, and potentially our family to her schemes. I asked Daniel to trace the connections further. Every new link revealed more, small business fronts, shell companies, repeated contacts with people who had connections to organized crime. And every single step seemed meticulously planned. I realized then that this wasn't just about betrayal or even money. This was a web, and I was trapped inside it. I tried confronting her again, calm but firm. Sarah, do you realize who you're endangering? This isn't just about us anymore. You're dragging people close to us into this. She smiled faintly, coldly, with that same smirk that had haunted me since the first photos. Relax. You think I'd endanger my life without purpose? Everything I do is calculated. And you're just going to have to trust that I know what I'm doing. Trust? After everything? My hands trembled. I thought about the kids, our friends, our home. If she could manipulate criminals, and those close to us, what else could she do? And then, as if mocking my fear, her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time explicitly mentioning our home address and a meeting that was scheduled for tonight. Daniel and I exchanged a glance. This was no longer just about exposing her. It was about protecting ourselves. And perhaps, if we were too late, protecting everyone we cared about. That night, Daniel and I parked 2 blocks away from the location mentioned in the message. It was an old, abandoned warehouse near the river, a place that reeked of secrecy. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant sound echoed like a warning. I felt my heart hammering in my chest. After everything, following her felt like stepping into a thriller I'd never wanted to live. Yet, we had no choice. We had to see what she was really doing, and who else was involved. We watched from the shadows as she arrived, wearing dark clothes and moving with that same confidence that had both terrified and fascinated me for weeks. She wasn't just meeting the men we knew. 2 more figures emerged from the shadows, masked, careful, and clearly professional. My stomach dropped. This was no casual exchange. Not casual at all. The briefcases came out again. But this time, I noticed something that made my blood run cold, a stack of papers with official-looking seals, alongside the cash. What was she doing with government forms? Legal documents? And why were those men treating her with such respect, almost fear? Daniel whispered, "Dad, this is bigger than money. Look at her. She's orchestrating it. She's running this operation, not just following orders." I couldn't believe it. The woman I had married, the one who baked cookies for the kids, laughed at my jokes, held my hand during hard times, was a mastermind. A criminal I didn't recognize at all. And then it happened. One of the men approached the warehouse door, whispered something, and a hidden camera angle showed a man waiting inside. The moment she entered the building, everyone else paused, as if the world itself had shifted. Daniel grabbed my arm. "We have to go in. We can't let her do this alone." I hesitated, torn between fear and the need to uncover the truth. But before I could make a decision, her phone buzzed again. Another message previewed, "They're watching. Don't let them see you." My blood ran cold. Someone else was involved. Someone dangerous. And I realized, following her had just pulled us into a world I wasn't prepared for. We waited until the coast seemed clear, then cautiously approached the warehouse. Every creak of the floor beneath our feet made my heart skip. Daniel and I kept low, eyes fixed on the slightly ajar door through which we had glimpsed Sarah earlier. Inside, what we saw froze me in place. Sarah stood at the center of a small group, clearly in command. Stacks of cash, piles of documents, and even some electronic equipment, computers, hard drives, were spread across tables. She was giving orders, pointing, gesturing. Every word she spoke carried authority, the men listened like she was the boss. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just money. She had built an operation that could easily involve fraud, laundering, and potentially blackmail. And the most terrifying part? Some of the documents bore names we knew, friends, neighbors, even distant relatives. Daniel whispered, "Dad, she's using our world as cover. She's not just betraying us, she's using people we trust as part of this." I couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to save myself and Daniel. But I had to know the extent of the betrayal. Sarah caught sight of us for just a second, just enough to flash that familiar smirk, and then turned back to her work as if nothing had happened. And then came the sound of a drawer opening. She pulled out an envelope marked with my name. My blood ran cold. Was it a trap? A message? Or had she anticipated that I'd be watching all along? I realized then that we were in far deeper than we'd ever imagined. This wasn't a momentary fling, or even a financial betrayal. It was an empire, and I was trapped inside its center. Daniel grabbed my arm. "We need a plan, Dad. Now. We can't confront her alone. This could ruin everything." But as we backed away, careful not to be seen, another figure appeared from the shadows, someone wearing a suit, someone I recognized from the city council, someone we never expected to be involved. My stomach dropped. Sarah's connections went beyond criminals. This was bigger. Much bigger. We couldn't wait any longer. Daniel and I stepped fully into the warehouse, trying to appear calm despite the adrenaline surging through our veins. Sarah froze for a moment, her eyes narrowing, but then that familiar smirk returned, the one that had haunted me for weeks. "Ah, so you decided to join the party," she said, voice dripping with mockery. "Curious little detectives, aren't we?" Before I could respond, the man in the suit from the city council stepped forward. Daniel whispered, "Dad, he's not here to help us." The tension was suffocating. Every person in the room watched, waiting for the first move. I took a deep breath. "Sarah, this ends tonight. You've lied, stolen, and dragged everyone into something dangerous. It's over." She laughed. A cold, unfeeling laugh that made my blood run cold. "Over? Oh, darling, you have no idea what you're dealing with. I've been 3 steps ahead of you the whole time." And then she revealed it. All the documents, all the money, the hidden accounts, everything was part of a scheme that could ruin dozens of lives, not just ours. Friends, neighbors, even the business community, they were all pieces in a game she controlled. I felt my hands shake. Why? Why betray your family, your life, everything we built? Her expression softened for just a second, almost human. Because sometimes, survival requires more than loyalty. And love, well, love can be manipulated. Daniel stepped forward, furious. "You're risking us. Mom, don't you see? This is insane." Sarah looked at him, then at me, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. But it vanished almost instantly. She knew the stakes. "You've always played safe," she said, voice low. "I chose the other path. And now, either you accept it or you get out of my way." And then the man in the suit made a move toward the cash and documents. Sarah tensed, but I realized something terrifying. She had planned for this, anticipated it, and had escape routes in place. We didn't argue further. We backed out, hearts racing, minds spinning. We knew this wasn't just a betrayal anymore, it was a war. As we stepped outside, Daniel whispered, "Dad, we have to protect ourselves. And maybe, it's time the authorities knew." I swallowed hard. After 22 years of marriage, after everything, I realized some battles couldn't be fought alone. And tomorrow would decide how much we would lose. The next day, Daniel and I made the hardest call of our lives. We went to the authorities. Every detail, every document, every transaction Sarah had been involved in was handed over. It was terrifying, knowing she could be caught, but necessary. Sarah didn't resist at first. She tried to charm, to manipulate, but the evidence was undeniable. Within days, the operation crumbled. The men she'd worked with vanished, either arrested or fleeing. The man from the council, investigated and removed. But the personal cost was immense. Our home felt empty without her presence, even as the betrayal still burned in my chest. Friends and neighbors looked at me differently, some in pity, some in disbelief. Daniel and I leaned on each other more than ever, rebuilding trust and our sense of safety, brick by brick. I've learned some harsh truths. People you love can be capable of unimaginable deception. Money, power, even secrets can warp hearts and destroy families. But I've also learned resilience. Life doesn't stop after betrayal. We adapt. We survive. And sometimes, we find a strength we didn't know we had. Sarah, she faced justice, but I realized holding on to anger wouldn't heal us. I chose to focus on my son, on rebuilding a life with honesty and integrity. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when we first married, but it was real. And in that reality, Daniel and I emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever. Betrayal can break you, or it can teach you who you truly are. I chose to let it teach me. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe for more real-life stories. hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Your support helps us share more stories like this.